Hi everybody, it's Cray and I teach watercolor and sometimes gouache, and today we are doing our crow project. We have Keenan here working the camera.
Hello.
And we will be doing this project in 6 steps. So our very first step is we are going to actually paint our bird, and we're going to focus on using single brush strokes for these kind of feathery part of our wings. Our second step is we will put in the highlighted areas of our bird, which is mainly like the top of the head, the back wing. Our third step is we will fill in the face and add some splatters. Our fourth step is we will put in the silhouette of these smaller crows that are kind of flying off of our main crow. Our fifth step is we will do some more splatters, and then our very last step are some textured details and anything finishing details we got to do. We are using 3 colors for this project. So our very first color is ivory black. Put that down here. Our second color is primary cyan. Our third color is permanent white. Now for you guys that are unfamiliar with gouache, we have an entire video dedicated to the specifics of gouache, what it's about, what it's like, how it's different. But to give you a little basic run through, gouache is essentially if watercolor and acrylic had a baby. And what I mean by that is the binder is the same in gouache as it is in watercolor, which is gum arabic, but it's opaque, which means you can layer it on top of each other, kind of like acrylic. So it's a wonderful medium and it's a very forgiving medium. It's tricky though because we approach it in the same way that we approach it with watercolor, and what I want to tell you is you can approach it like watercolor or you can approach it like acrylic paint. It is flexible and can do both, so it just depends on what you're going for here. We're going to approach it more like acrylic paint in this project, which means we're going to be grabbing thick paint, like letting it be really opaque and layering our highlights on top of our darks, which is traditionally what you do with acrylic paint. So that's how we're going to use it today, okay?
Sweet.
All right. I am using 3 brushes for this project. I have a round 2, a round 6, and a round 12. The round 2 and round 6 are our go-to brushes, and I've started bringing in other brushes to show you guys how to use those. The gouache we're using is Pebeo Studio Gouache, and I got my Holbein soft tape. I think we're good.
We're set.
Okay, great.
We're square.
Let us do the outline, then the oath, and then we will get to painting. So I have my outline here. I'm going to take my graphite paper and do dark, shiny side down. And whatever mark you make on your paper, it's going to show up underneath on your watercolor paper. Now, I always like to do a little disclaimer about outlines. 1, they're a guide. This is not a coloring book, okay? You do not have to stay within the lines. The outlines we provide are really just so you guys don't have to worry about drawing. Drawing is a very special skill set in its own right that is definitely worthy of learning. It's important to learn how to draw. However, I don't want that to stop you guys from being able to paint, because I feel like painting is really fun. So we provide outlines for you guys, but you don't even have to use them. You can draw your own thing, you can change it, you can adjust it. It's just a guide, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Second thing about outlines is you do not have to use graphite paper to transfer them. You can use a light box, you can use a window, whatever you want. Some people really struggle with the graphite paper. I understand that, but honestly, it's what I use. It's my favorite. I'm not a fan of light boxes. And then the last tip about outlines is it's easy to kind of get lost on your outline. So if you use like a colored pencil or a felt tip marker that has color on it to trace, much easier to see what lines you still have to do. I think that's all the tips. Keenan, are there any other tips?
I don't think so.
Oh, if you want your lines darker, you push harder. If your lines are too dark on your paper, you're gonna be lighter. Now with this project, because it's just like black and because we're using opaque paint, then the pencil lines aren't really going to be seen. If you're using just watercolor for this project, try and trace as light as you can because watercolor is transparent, which means you will be able to see those pencil lines through the paint.
That was the only tip I was going to add.
Oh, so when you said you didn't have a tip, you lied?
I just waited patiently, Sarah. I said, you know, she'll probably get there. She knows what she's talking about.
Sometimes.
Most of the time.
Most of the time. Okay. That is all. Oh, also, and I should have said this, the dashes are where I signify where there are highlights or shadows. I don't always trace them. Today, I guess I felt like tracing them, but it's okay because we're layering it, so it doesn't matter anyway. But I just want to call attention to, usually I'll do a straight, like continuous strong line for the shape of something and then the dash lines for value shifts. Use that information as you will.
You know what? Thank you, Gouache, for
Gouache.
letting us layer things.
Thank you so much. Gouache, you're just so great. Okay, let's do our oath. If you can raise your right hand and repeat after me, I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise not to compare my work.
Promise not to compare my work.
And I promise to have fun.
And I promise to have fun.
Thank you. Okay, so what we're gonna do here is we're gonna start painting our crow. And what I'm gonna focus on as I paint this is I'm gonna think about how I can use single brush strokes to do the feather part of this bird. So what that looks like is I'm gonna pick up some black gouache with my round 12. And I'm gonna think through the direction that I want my brush strokes to be. So if I look at my wing here, I want this to be kind of more horizontal, like just go across, and then these are going to be individual strokes. So I'm just going to like put these in. And then when I get to this point, I'm going to pick up more gouache, and I'm really just going to try and follow the outline. And you're gonna kind of lift up your brush at the end to get a thinner line. And if it's a little too rough, like see how it's a bit too rough, you can always add a little bit of water and a little bit more paint to make it a little bit of a smoother line. And if you leave some kind of white, little thin white lines in between the little wing sections, that's okay.
Do they get covered up later, or are those just easy highlights?
Those are just easy highlights. It's an easy way to say that there is separation between these different feathers. And even though realistically there probably wouldn't be such thick spaces in between the feathers, we can lean a little bit more into the illustrative quality of letting kind of outlines be helpful in the form and structure of our bird.
Cool.
And then as you get to like this part, they're gonna get a little bit like closer together, a little thinner. And then I try and like kind of round them up. Boop, boop, boop. There.
Nice.
One wing done.
That looks cool.
Isn't it fun?
Wow.
When I was painting this, so now I'm gonna fill in the body, and this one, it's really just kind of about filling it in, okay? So I'm not gonna be too precise, I'm just gonna go for it. And I'm going to cover up all of my outlines because gouache is opaque, so you will not be able to see those, but that's okay. And then when you get to the tail, if you want to switch to your 6, if that's easier for you, you can. Or try and do them with your 12, kind of like the more thinned out. Let's move to my 6 and see how that goes.
Man, I like what that brush does with those feather tails, though.
When I was making this project, I was painting this, and I realized what an excellent project this was to practice just single brush strokes, and how by the simplicity of that and how effective it can be. So I thought, man, we should really just focus on that aspect. Okay, yeah, that was a little bit easier to get the different strokes in between there. And I'm gonna kind of avoid the face as I do this, mostly because I'm using a larger brush and I'm just kind of trying to fill in the bird. And the face is smaller, so I'm gonna wanna switch my brushes when I get there. Okay. And I'm gonna do the back wing, but I'm gonna start introducing a little bit of blue and white to my coloring here. So what you could do if you wanted is you can make this a monochromatic painting, which means you only use black. But sometimes it's fun to use different hues or colors or in the highlights to kind of just make this painting a little bit richer. So I decided to use blue as the highlight here. So that's why I have a little bit of cyan, which I'm gonna bring over here.
I'm pretty sure crows are some of the smartest animals in the world.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah, and yes, in Native American cultures, they're they symbolize wisdom.
See? I believe that.
Okay, so, sorry, let me pull my palette in so you guys can see. I have a little bit of black, I have a little bit of cyan, and I have a little bit of white, and I have this kind of really desaturated blue color, which is really pretty actually. It's reading gray on the screen. Sorry, I just looked at the screen. It looks gray, but for me in person, it definitely has a blue tint to it. So you guys mix until you feel comfortable with the color. And remember, there's no wrong here, okay? And it's gouache, you can always layer. So let's say you mix a color, you put it down, you don't like it, let it dry, do another painting on top of it, okay?
Nice.
So now I'm going to do that same thing of doing the individual strokes with this kind of blue gray color that I mixed.
Check this research fact out.
What's up?
Crows are as smart as a 7-year-old child.
What? I have a 7-year-old child. They're just little Lunas flying everywhere.
Yep. Literally, they were described as not only playful and mischievous, but also intelligent.
Whoa.
Yeah. They use tools to solve complex problems, and they remember faces for years and mimic sounds they hear.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's cool.
Okay, I'm going to take this blue color that I mixed and put it on the back of my bird here. The head, back of the head and the back. So I'm just starting to introduce a little bit of a highlight on the body of the bird itself. And that way it's gonna create a separation between the wings. Because if they were all just black, which you could do, you might lose a little bit of your depth. But by adding a highlight on there, we're creating a separation. And then I'm gonna use, so as my wing kind of gets closer to the body, it's gonna get more black. So I use the gray kind of up here. And then when I do this part, I want that to be black. And then remember the feathers are gonna get a little bit like thinner. So I'm switching to my 6. Just kind of. if you want to kind of adjust. I kind of really like the rough texture, but I want there to be some thinner lines. So I'm going to go in and just do a couple boop, boop. Just because I want there to be a difference in size of the brush stroke as it gets kind of smaller. I'm so in love with this wing. I
was gonna say, I really love the hints of that like bluish.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be crazy, just a little.
Big fan.
Okay, now what we're gonna go to now is step 3. So we're going to focus on the face, we're going to focus on the feet, and then we're going to add some splatters. And I just want to call out that if you have the step-by-step, I don't fill in the face till the end, and that's because when I was painting it, I was just like, wasn't sure if I wanted to leave the face white and just the beak black. And then as I was painting it, I was just like, no, I need to paint the whole thing black. So I'm just going to do it now because it's time.
It's time.
It's time. So when I was also creating this project, I had to do some research. I'm like, what is the difference between a crow and a raven?
Ooh.
Do you know, Keenan?
I do not.
So they look very similar. And I actually made sure I painted a crow because there have been quite a few instances where I thought I was painting an animal and it was a different animal and I tiled it wrong and everything. And crows have they're smaller. They have a pointier beak, and ravens actually have a really strong forehead to it's rounder. Their head is rounder, where crows it kind of just. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
I'm pretty sure those are the difference.
It's almost like a raven's wearing a mask on a round head rather than being triangle.
Wouldn't it be funny if I actually got them confused, mixed up?
Even after reading about them?
Yeah. I honestly wouldn't be surprised.
I mean, that would be funny though.
Yeah, I do stuff like that.
Me too.
All the time. Okay, and then I'm going to switch to my 2 because what I want to try and do here is I want the eye to be black, but there to be a tiny, tiny, tiny dot in there for a highlight. So you can either paint around that area or just put a white dot in later. I also want to leave a very, very thin white line. And actually, Keenan, can you go to the close-up? I want to show them. On my reference photo, I don't even think you can see it on this. There is the tiniest white outline along the top half of the eye. You really can only see that glare.
Oh yeah, I can see it a little bit.
But if you have the reference photo in front of you, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's barely there. So what I'm doing is as I'm painting this, I'm going to try and leave that in. Paint around it, essentially. And the reason why, you can go back in with the white gouache and put it in, but what's tricky about that is it's such a fine line, and gouache is kind of thick in general, that it would be hard to get such a fine, clean white line with gouache. So sometimes it's easier just to leave the paper white and paint around it than to try and go and put it back in. But do your best. And don't worry, once we fill in the eyeball, it won't look as weird. Which is how it always goes.
I was just gonna say that.
Yeah, eyeballs matter, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, the white line around the eye is way too big. It's too wide. So I have to go in and thin out that line. That feels better. And I actually might go back in and put the glare spot bigger. I think my glare spot got a little bit too tiny, but it's way easier to do a white dot than a white, really thin, fine line. So that's okay. And then oh, sorry, go ahead, Keenan.
I was gonna say, oh yeah, thanks, Gouache.
Yeah, gouache.
Again.
Again. This is why you're the best. And I'm just gonna put in the feet, and the feet get a little bit wonky. I feel like birds' feet are just so weird.
They're so strange.
They just look
talony.
Yeah, all the time. So it's just like, let me just put you in so people know you have feet, and that's really all I want to do. I don't want to spend a lot of time looking at you. And also the feet are kind of like overlapping a little bit, so they just look weird. But that's all you need to do. You just need to just put them in and then move on, and we can all forget that we have to paint weird bird feet. Okay. Now I feel like my beak got a little bit too narrow, so I'm just going to slightly round the top. There we go. That feels better. Okay, now we're going to do some splatters, and this is where we kind of embrace the watercolor element. I really wanted this painting to feel chaotic. I wanted it to feel like it had energy and movement. So that's why we do the splatters. That's why we do strong, not horizontal, but angled lines. That's why we have all of this stuff flittering off here. Where like this painting by itself, if you were to just stop right here, minus the details, is a very, it signifies movement just in the shape of the bird, but it still feels pretty static, right? In the way of like, that's it. And I really wanted it to feel like energy, like when you see the wings of the birds move and you can almost hear like, you know, in like the movies, and it's that sound where it's like whoosh, whoosh.
Yep, I was just gonna do the same sound. Yes.
Can you do it better? Yes. And I was just like, okay, I need something to signify that movement. So that's why I did the splatters. But this is where art is super interesting and fun, because that could mean something different to you, where it's just like, okay, I want to communicate that movement and that energy. What does that look like? Maybe it's wind lines. Maybe it's like you're actually like doing like lines of, instead of splatters, it's like lines. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Or, I don't know, maybe it's by a tree and the leaves are actually angled, moving away from it to show that the wind is actually like affecting. There's just, it's fun to solve those kinds of problems, and it's fun to like notice things and how it affects you and makes you feel, and then you can put that in your painting. So I'm gonna take my round 12. You can use your 12 or your 6 or your 2, but just know that the larger the brush, the larger the splatters. I'm gonna pick up some color. You can do some blue, you can do some black, whatever color you want. And you're gonna wanna move anything that is expensive.
Throw it on the ground.
Please wear an apron. Please move iPads and computers and cell phones. And essentially, I'm gonna look at the 3 different angles I have going on here. I have a wing going this way, I have a wing going this way, and the body of the bird is going this way. So those are the angles I'm gonna try and do when I do my splatters to kind of reinforce that movement. So when you want splatters to have movement, you're gonna essentially do a stabbing motion with your arm in the angle that you want the splatters to go. So you're gonna pick up paint, you're gonna pick up water, and I'm gonna say, okay, I want splatters that way, and I want splatters this way. And then you can do some like loose ones, so it's not just like,
that looks awesome.
Okay, and then I want splatters coming this way. Okay, and then you can say, and this is always a surprise, this is always an accidental element, so you're just like, ooh, I really like how that turned out, or I feel like I need, like this is just too thin and long. So what you can do is you can even adjust your splatter. So let's say you did this and you're like, meh. If you lift, they're still there, but it's a much lighter value, which means it's not as strong in your painting and composition. And then you can just start over where you're like, There we go. Let's do the same thing over here. And like how hard how do I say this?
Mm-hmm. You know how.
So if you want it to be very like tight and straight and angled, you're gonna do it more forcefully. You're gonna like do a quicker, stronger movement with your arm. If you want it to be a little bit softer and looser, you're gonna do that same movement, but not as forceful, okay?
Not as abrupt.
Not as like...
jarring.
Yeah, not as intense. It's like instead of like, ha. You guys get the difference, you know what I'm saying. Okay. This is looking cool.
It is.
This I feel like is interesting. It's not nearly as strong in my reference photo, but I think it's bringing something here that I appreciate. So what we're going to do is we're just going to like let that sit for a second. And our next step is the silhouettes of the small crows. So you can use your 6, you can use your 2, you can use your 12 if you want, whatever you feel comfortable using, but I'm going for smaller brushes since these are smaller birds. And you're just gonna kind of paint them in. Now the thing with bird silhouettes is like, our brain is telling us that bird silhouettes need to look a certain way, always. But most of the time they actually look nothing like that. And if you actually pay attention to different bird silhouettes, they're all different shapes, very wonky, because birds are in movement. They're constantly moving, and their wings and the angle they could overlap. So all of that is to say, don't get so lost in these bird silhouettes and so like uptight about them that the one funky silhouette you think ruined your painting, because I'm telling you right now it didn't. So just kind of go with the flow and recognize that when there's a lot of the same thing over and over again, the viewer's brain is going to pick up what's going on. So they're saying, oh, those are bird silhouettes. Okay, and then it like moves on.
Yeah, I mean, you painted 3 of those in like 4 seconds.
Yeah, just quick little, and I did them in various sizes because I wanted it to feel like a lot, and I want it to feel chaotic. I want it to feel like they're kind of like, is this one crow and this is the rest like far away? Is this crow kind of coming off the wing itself? Like there's so many options here. And so when you're painting this, as you're looking at this, you can add more. You can take some away. Maybe you want some coming off this back wing too. Maybe you like them all to be small. There's so many ways that you can adjust this to whatever it is that you want. So I want to empower you to make all those decisions, and none of them are wrong. And then if you get some splatters that are just like too big, turn them into birds. You know? What
a good idea.
Or if you're like, oh, I don't really like how that turned out, well, just change it. Your outline might end here, but I want to make sure that the crows go all the way off my paper. So even if my outline ended, I'm going to keep the crows going till the edge of my tape.
Chaos.
We just want chaos. And the bigger ones, if you want to do some like kind of little feathered textures on the wings, You can. So in this situation, I have a large dark splatter here, but it's too close to this bird to make it its own bird, but I feel like it's too dark, so I'm just gonna lift. So it's still there, but not that I feel like it's messing with my crows. Nobody messes with my crows.
Do you know what a group of crows is called?
A murder.
A murder. That's kind of cool.
It is cool. Yeah, I kind of really like how dark these splatters are on this painting, because I feel like in this area especially, you're like, are those far away little birds or not? You know?
Yes, I do. I also like that aspect.
Yeah. Okay. Step 5, this is where, now that we've put in our crow silhouettes, our first layer of splatters, and our bird, this is where we want to look at our composition as a whole and say, do we like how the splatters are looking? Do we need to make some slight adjustments? So for me, I think I want to do a couple more splatters here, just to fill in the space, but I'm going to purposely choose a light value. I also feel like there needs to be a little bit more up here, and it won't, how do I say this? It will activate those spaces without taking away from the composition of the angles and the movement by doing light value splatters in those bare spaces. I also feel like there needs to be a couple here. I really love how this turned out. That was completely an accident. I think it's beautiful, and I want it to feel not so alone. So I'm gonna do a little splatters to help it have friends, okay?
Okay.
So I'm gonna grab my 6, and I'm gonna grab maybe a little bit of this like blue-white color that I have, like the light gray, and then really water it down so it's a light value. Let me move this closer so you guys can see. And then I'm just gonna kind of do the more like soft. So if you want to do big drops without the angles, you're gonna do that same kind of stabbing motion, but just up and down. I feel like it needs to have just some kind of right there. Okay. And then this is where you're like, that's too big. Kind of like that. And let's do a couple here. And I feel like it needs a little some there.
That looks cool.
And maybe, I don't know, something is telling me that I need to have a strong one right here. Am I crazy?
No.
I think it's because this line is so strong and this line is so strong that it, instead of it just being like in my reference photo where it just kind of sprays off the wing, and this is kind of not as strong of an angle, that it was okay to leave it. But now that I have such a strong line right here, I feel like I need one right here, and that will kind of give the impression of like, whoa, like a ray. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. I'm thinking that this bird just transformed into a crow, because it's magical season.
Like spooky magical season?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing about splatters, is one of those things where you're just like, we're just gonna see what's gonna happen.
Release control.
Yep. There we go. Yeah. Yep, cool. That feels better to me. Okay. So with all that splattering, we probably got some splatters on our bird, but that's okay because we're not done with our bird yet. And this is where we're gonna go in and we're on our last step. So we're gonna do some finishing highlights. And then if you look at my bird, I have some like kind of more vibrant highlights of the blue detailed area for like to give the hint of feathers, like especially on this back wing and a little bit on the body. So that's what we're gonna put in right now. But first you wanna make sure that the coloring and value of your bird you're happy with. And I feel like this needs to be darker. So I'm gonna do another layer of gouache on this section of my wing. And that's the thing with gouache and watercolor. It's gonna dry a lighter value than when you put it down. So if you need to do another layer on top of it, there's nothing wrong with that. Zip that out. And that feels good. I feel like that needs to be a little line. Okay. Okay, I feel pretty good about that. And now you can use your 2 or your 6. I'm gonna grab white, I'm gonna grab blue, and I'm gonna let this be a little bit more vibrant. See how bright that blue is?
Yes.
And you're just gonna see what it looks like when you put it down. Ooh, that looks nice. I like that a lot.
That is cool.
So I'm gonna do these kind of curved, there are many layers of feathers to birds and some of them are smaller and tighter together and then some are like nice and long. So we're trying to communicate the area where they're a little bit smaller and tighter together on this wing. And you can pick up other colors as you're doing this. So like now I'm just gonna do like more strong cyan. You can just do more of that light blue.
I like that light blue. I guess you would want this to be a highlight, but man, I love that really subtle blue that you made.
The desaturated one?
Yeah.
Let's put a couple of that in there. It's like just a little.
It's just a good blue color.
It is. I feel like it's a popular like kitchen cabinet color right now.
It is?
Yeah, like a deep, like that.
That would look good with some brass handles.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Okay, and then you can do a couple like highlight swoops on the feathers themselves back here. But don't go too crazy. It's just like hints. You just want to do a couple. And this is like mostly white that I'm picking up right now just for that like little stronger hint of highlight. Okay, we're gonna leave that for a second. We're gonna go to our head. Sorry, grab my napkin. And I want there to be kind of a stronger highlight on the top. I'm going to use straight cyan. Like really play with these different colors.
That looks cool.
And some stronger blue here. And some highlights. We're kind of just trying to hint at the different feather textures without having to put all of them in. And you can decide how far you want to take it. And maybe just a little putting in separation of the feathers, just a little. Doesn't have to be a lot.
Do feathers, do they get gray as the bird gets older?
I have no idea.
How do you tell if a bird is older?
You look that up, because I'm actually very interested to know. I would assume that they would, I don't know. Because dogs get a little bit.
Yeah, that's kind of that's the kind of train of thought I was going for.
Okay, and then with my 2, I'm just on the belly here. I'm just gonna do some like rough textures kind of coming off. Again, these are just last minute, or not last minute, but just like finishing details. If you wanna do some, narrow in some lines, do a little bit of textures here and there.
Birds never go gray.
Really?
So this says, now if the colors of the feathers were formed using pigments, like with humans, the feather color would fade over time because pigments are not produced in the same quantity as we age. However, nanostructures remain intact even as the birds age.
That is fascinating.
I know. This one blew my mind too. Many birds have the ability to instantaneously adjust their color so their coloration never loses its vividness with age.
What?
New research finds.
Birds are amazing.
Seriously, birds are cool.
Okay, now we're kind of like zeroing in at the very end, which means I'm gonna add my little white glare dot on my eye. And I felt like the belly got a little bit round here. Do you see that? It was like, bloop.
Yep, full belly.
A full, he just ate. But if you don't like that, you can thin it out by taking white and working it into.
Oh, wow.
I mean, there's going to be a slight discoloration because it's not the white paper, it's the gouache, and you might have to do a couple layers, but you can adjust things like this with gouache where you're just like, ooh, you know, the shape of that head or the belly is a little too round, so let's like tighten that up. You can totally do that with gouache, which is pretty cool.
Gouache.
No, I didn't like that I did that.
There's a hummingbird that can change its color every second.
Every second?
Yep. Pretty cool.
Okay. And I feel like my head got maybe a little bit too round. Do you see that? I want it to feel a little bit more narrow. So I'm gonna see what it's like if I just kind of adjust that. There we go. That feels better. You can do the same thing with like the beak. Like if your beak got just a little bit too big. And what I mean by, let's just see what happens is you can layer it and put color back. So let's say you you thin out the beak and then you're like, actually, I don't really like how that looks. Let that dry and put black on top of it and you can thicken it back up. Okay. But I kind of want to round out the bottom too. Now this might be a little bit extra, everything that I'm doing.
It's those details, you mean?
Yeah.
Why is everything extra? Because it can be. You could even have it like with a worm in its mouth.
Oh, yeah. Didn't like that curve, so I'm gonna smooth that back out. There.
Ravens live longer than crows.
Really?
Yeah. And the American crow lives 7 to 8 years.
Dang.
Yeah. And the raven jumps up to 10 to 15. Then the Australian one lives for 22.
Okay, I think he's good.
Ooh, look at him.
I don't know, I think there's just something slightly off about his beak.
Maybe he's angled more.
Seeing what it's like if I'd introduce just a hint of a lighter value to the beak. That feels better. Just a hint. Okay. We're done.
Oh.
We did it. Should we do the reveal?
Yep.
Okay. And you can see that you get a little bit messy with your splatters. But those clean lines are so satisfying.
Why is that? Why is a clean line so satisfying?
I don't know. Look at that.
So clean on that edge. I love that top right corner.
Me too. Okay. This project was fun and crazy and chaotic, and you never knew what you were going to get, and it was kind of a surprise the whole time, and that's the fun thing about it. And that can be really hard, especially as we're learning something new, because we're kind of tying our value of if we're good at something or not by the outcome. Probably trying to see, is this for us? Is this not for us? And I just want to say that that is not necessarily how it works. When you learn something, it takes time to build up the skill level. And if you're consistent in your practice, those skills will come. So it's not necessarily about, let me try this. Oh, and I'm so good at this, so I'm going to keep doing it. It's more like, how does this make me feel? And do I enjoy it? And that's all you need to keep going. And then those skills will build over time. So eventually you'll be able to paint whatever you want. But don't let the cadence of learning stop you from thinking that this is something for you. If you want it to be for you, it is for you. That's it. That's all it really takes. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to paint with me out of your busy day. And I want to say good job for actually doing that, because we know that time is our most valuable currency, asset, I don't know. Time's like really important. So I just want to acknowledge that and say good job prioritizing your creativity. If you are on Instagram, you can tag us at Let's Go Make Art. If you're interested in trying these projects, learning about gouache, and having a really fun experience, this is from the Sacred Shadows box. And if you're on Facebook, you can join our watercolor group. That's called Let's Make Art Watercolor. And that's it. Keenan, always a pleasure.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys next time. Bye.